Welcome in, everybody, to episode 46 of the Seven Figures or Bust podcast, the number one podcast in the world for growing your insurance business. I'm your host, Christian Brindle. I'm joined with my co-host, Glen Shelton, and boom, do we have a doozy of a show for you guys today. Good morning, Glen. I'm loving your shirt.
Good morning.
Thank
you.
Looking very good.
Thank you. For those of you listening, yes, for those of you listening, you can't see my beautiful face or my beautiful outfit. I'm wearing my Everything Senior Insurance white polo, 3 buttons, top button undone because I'm not a nerd.
For those of you that don't know, Everything Senior Insurance, the rebranded new name of our insurance agency, Christian Brindle Insurance Services, formerly known as. So yeah, I mean, this is going to be the year of ESI. That's what I
got. Yesterday in the mail, I got the rebrand letter because I'm an ESI client because I have policies with ESI. Right. So I got the letter. Yeah, I was like, what's this? And then I got a business card from the CEO in the letter. I was like, this is amazing.
Was it just my business card, or did it come with everyone's?
No, there was a series of business cards.
Good. Okay.
Yes.
Making sure.
Yes.
Those mailing people. Sometimes they don't do what I wish.
I liked the co-branded at the top too. You know, Christian Brindle Insurance Services, Everything Senior Insurance, kind of helping everyone understand the transition there.
Yes. So we have a couple of topics we want to kind of cover with you guys on today's show. And I think both of them, truthfully, could be probably their own show entirely if we were so inclined to do so. But we're going to try to squeeze them both into one show today. The first topic this morning, before we get into the main topic, and that is, which product line should an agent start with, right? This is a commonly asked question. But before we jump into that, I thought it would be fun for us to discuss what does a healthy portfolio look like for an agent that's starting out? Because people ask this a lot too, right? Like, how many contracts should I pick up? How many carriers do I need to get started? There are a lot of agents that will pick up 50 contracts, and
absurd
before they ever sell a policy. So
yeah,
let's kind of dive into this a little bit. Like, what is the right number? And it does kind of bleed into the main topic as well, right? Like, so without spoiling the main topic necessarily, how do we decipher this, right? How many contracts do you need to get started? What do you say, Mr. Glen Shelton?
What's funny is there is this perception among agents and even some agency owners who are just getting started, where they think not only on the contract side, but I'm also thinking about how they always want to get licensed in 40 or 50 states. They're like, I'm going to get licensed in every state. There is, and I had a little bit of that early on. Like, I had some thoughts like that where I don't know what it is, but there's something in the industry atmosphere, especially for newer agents, where they think more licenses. And I would argue even maybe with the carrier contracts, it's the same way. The more carriers that I'm contracted with, the more states that I'm licensed in, the more money I'm going to make. And it's a total logical fallacy. It's actually the opposite, in my opinion. If you're new, if you're just getting started, even if you're coming to the industry from a different line, like maybe you were a P&C agent for a while, and now you decided you want to do Medicare and life, I highly recommend less is more on this one. We can argue, and Christian and I will here, on what the number is, but the reality is the right number is less is more. Start with one state, maybe 2 states. I'm right on the border of 2 states, so I feel like I could justify being in 2 states because I have 2 states within like 15 minutes of where I live. But start with, your local area, and start with, my opinion on this, I would say start with 1 to 3 carriers. If you really want, 1 to 3. If you really just want to start with one carrier, I think that's okay. Like, if you're talking about like your first 30 days, one carrier is probably not bad. Like, cut your teeth, submit your first couple apps. If you really want to start with like an infant portfolio of a couple of complementary carriers, because there are carriers, there's no one carrier that does it all perfectly. There's some that are close, but most of the time you need to fill holes, especially on the final expense side with the underwriting. And I'm sure on the Medicare supplement side, same thing. Some of the underwriting holes that one carrier might take this person, another carrier won't take that person. So 1 to 3 is my personal opinion on this.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Because I think part of the answer to this question to me, I agree. I 100% agree that less is more, right? I think you don't need 15 to 20 contracts to start. You don't.
No.
It's ridiculous. It'll take you months probably to get ready to sell for all of them, and you're going to be confused.
How by the way, how many carriers are you contracted with, or how are we contracted with right now? Go ahead, tell the people.
60 to 70, something like that.
I thought it was like 90. I thought we were close to 100 carrier relationships.
Maybe we are. I don't know. I don't know. I legitimately don't know.
But we're 10 years in, so what we're doing is not applicable to new agents, you guys.
It might be closer to 80 to 90 if you're thinking about like life and ACA and everything.
Yeah.
What comes into my mind when I think about that, just because I'm a Medicare guy, is Medicare contracts, right? We have more Medicare contracts than probably anything else. But if you put everything in there, it might be close to 80 to 90. It probably is in that ballpark. I think that less is certainly more. I 100% agree with that. I think the right number of contracts you should start off with, I think, does depend a little bit on where you are, right? Because there are some areas where, like, if you pick up 1 or 2 carriers, you will probably lose sales from not having another carrier.
Sure.
Especially in a very hyper competitive, let's say, Medicare Advantage market, right? I think like MedSup's all the same. Final expense is all the same, right? Like in terms of the product benefits. And so like you don't need all these carriers. You just need a few.
True.
Medicare Advantage is so different because you're dealing with networks, you're dealing with formularies, you're dealing with product benefits. So it gets tricky. At the same time, if you're in an area that has 15 Medicare Advantage carriers,
still don't need all of them.
You don't need them all. But maybe you need like 4 or 5 of the best ones, right? Like if someone was starting off here, and I don't want to give too much juice to any of you that are here that are looking to start off, stay away. But let's say we're trying to let's say like I'm using that as an example, right? Like Salt Lake City, probably not thought of as a big metropolitan area, but it is become a fairly big metropolitan area.
For sure.
There are
home to the biggest Costco in the United States, you guys. Salt Lake City.
Is that true?
That's a fun fact. I just read that the other day. You have. I'm so jealous. It's probably within a mere 20, 30 minutes of your home. You get to go to the biggest Costco in the United States. Christian Brindle.
See, the town I live in is so small now. You know, I live in Eagle Mountain in 2025, year of our Lord.
Go find his house, guys. Go to Christian's house.
Please don't. And so, please don't. But we do have a Costco in my little town. I was very pleasantly surprised. I thought it was not possible. But it is indeed. It's about 5 minutes from my home, and
it's probably not the one.
Not the biggest Costco.
It's not the biggest. Yeah, it's got to be in Salt Lake.
Confident.
Yeah, I am too.
But now I need to figure this out and visit it. But I think like if you're starting off here, let's say, there's probably at this point 7 or 8 Medicare Advantage carriers. I'm trying to remember the exact number off the top of my head, but a couple pulled out, right? So 7 or 8. I think you probably really need 3 to 4 of them. You might now long term, you probably want to pick up the rest of them from the standpoint that you don't want to lose a sale because you don't have a certain product. I think with Medicare Advantage, that's a different conversation because every MA carrier has a place for someone. It caters to someone, right? But to start off, I would say like Medicare Advantage contracts, I'd say 3 to 4 in most cases. But you probably want carriers. This is the interesting thing with Medicare. Some of the bigger carriers, if they're popular in the Medicare Advantage side, like UHC's this way, Humana's this way, they come with the MedSup product included in the contract. So you do one contract and you get MA and MedSup in one contract, right? That's beautiful. Whereas you have carriers like Aetna and Cigna where they're 2 different contracts. You have to fill out 2 contracts to get the MA and the MedSup. They're different carriers almost. Well, they are different carriers. So that's an interesting thing too, because I think when you're talking about a mixture of a portfolio, you need to make sure you have options for products, right? So I'm attracted to that. If it works out in your area to get a carrier that will give you MA, PDP, and MedSup in one contract, one and done, and it's prevalent in your area, that's a slam dunk to me.
Couple things in the comment section, you guys. I got the comments pulled up. If you are watching the live stream of this in the 7-Figure Medicare Agent Facebook group, we see your comments. We love you. We appreciate you guys. Also, by commenting on the live streams, it automatically enters you into Freebie Friday, which allows you to potentially win something free. Last week was turning 65 leads. This Friday, maybe Summit tickets. Maybe we'll give away some free Summit tickets, you guys. Ooh, that's a big freebie. Okay, so a couple things in the live stream comments already I want to mention. So one is from Jason. I can say from experience, trying to jump into everything at once is so overwhelming. Totally agree with you. Another comment from CJ, who is apparently in your backyard, Saratoga Springs.
So I could throw a rock from my house and hit you, is what you're saying.
Yeah. CJ also gets to go to the biggest Costco in the United States, potentially. This is a great question, though, right in line with everything we're talking about. For a newer agent, which line of business is easier to close?
Let's save this one because I think this ties into
for the
main
second
topic.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll come back to this one, CJ. We appreciate you.
We will, because I think that's a great question and a valid question.
Yeah.
I think when you're talking about, so this is what I would tell a new agent, right? Yeah. Our premier agents are required to pick up 7 contracts, I want to say.
I believe it's 7. Yeah,
I believe it's 7 as well.
My understanding is 7, yes. As a premier agent. I'm a premier agent as well, actually. So, yes.
I didn't take my alpha brain this morning, you guys. But
by the way, one of our premier agents sent a message to Lead Heroes, and they're like, "I'm a premium agent." I was like, "Whoa, premium! I like that."
Maybe change the name to that.
Maybe we change it to You're a premium agent, baby. I love that.
Yeah, but our premier agents are required to pick up 7 contracts. Now we switch them out based on area, right? If there's a carrier that's not in their market or anything like that. But I like having a balance right off the bat and a mixture of having the products, right? So like there's products that are MA products in there. There's products that I mentioned a second ago that are the triple threat, as I like to call them, MA, PDP, MedSup. Yeah. But then there's also products in there that are Medicare supplement focused specifically or dental, like Physicians Mutual. Yep. We also have like Manhattan Life Dental in there, which is its own contract. So like it's nice to, I think, have some options for some ancillary product options, some MA options, some MedSup options. And like that's what we typically advise our premier agents to do. We reward them for doing that by giving them premier agent status, which gives them, discounted leads, discounted virtual assistants, CRM, university, access to trainings, all kinds of things like that. And I think that might be a nice way to think about it, right? Like build out 5 to 7 carriers that is a mixture of products, right? That give you like a mixture of products that you can work with. MA, MedSup, maybe some FE, maybe some ancillary products, like dental, cancer, things like that. That's probably a good starting off point in my opinion.
Naturally over time, this will grow based on your needs, the situation that you're in. As a life agent coming into the business, I was really only selling one carrier for the first I'd say month or two, which I'm super. At the time, I thought I kind of bought into some of this ethos that's floating around in the industry. Like I did think at the time, I'm like, man, I need all these carriers. Why am I only selling one carrier? But I honestly think the agency I started with set me up the right way by really focusing on one carrier. And then I went to three. And then over time, I'd say probably the next 1 to 2 years of selling life full time, I did probably get to the point where I was rotating between 7 to 10 carriers based on the situation. If someone wanted a fully underwritten term policy, I was going with North American. I wasn't using some of these simplified issue carriers I was working with, just based on the specific situation I got in. Sometimes it was a very oriented conversation towards living benefits on the life policy. It wasn't just the life policy they wanted. They really wanted these living benefits where they could potentially access the policy based on certain things that were going on. So the portfolio kind of naturally grew. We're not here to say like you only need 1 or 3 or 5 carriers forever. We mentioned a moment ago that we're at like 80, 90 potential carrier contracts that we have active right now. So it's like, obviously our situation has grown a ton over the past decade, but you'll kind of naturally, at the same time though, again, that comment Jason said in the live stream, I think is super valid. Trying to jump into too much at once is overwhelming. And if you get overwhelmed and you stop progressing as an agent, you stop writing policies because you're trying to understand all these carriers. You're trying to understand all these different types of policies. That's just a disservice to you,
Yeah, I would totally agree 100%. And I think I want to harp even a little bit more on what Glenn said a second ago about, you're starting out, unless it's a very specific situation, right? Like there's exceptions to rules, certainly, like Glenn living on, basically, he has 1 foot in Washington and 1 foot in Oregon. And he's like, hey, which one am I in? He's that guy.
It's easier to run from the feds when you're in 2 states at once, you guys.
But outside of that, get licensed in your home state and try to grow in your home state. I mean, it's expensive to get licensed all over the place. Trust me, we're in 45. It's a nice chunk of coin every year to keep us licensed.
Chunk of coin?
Chunk of choin. It's a nice chunk of choin to be licensed in those places.
It's got alpha brain, bro. We need you. We need you here today.
But no, it's expensive, right? It's expensive to be licensed in all those places. And not 100%. Only is it expensive, it's really complicated. Even if you had, let's hypothetically say you had 3 Medicare Advantage carriers, but you're licensed in 12 states, that's going to be super complicated for you too, because unlike final expense, unlike Medicare supplement, the MA plans are very, very vastly different from area to area to area. And so you're just absolutely, you're Kurt Cobaining yourself.
On that note, Christian, tell the folks who today's sponsor is.
That was bad. I apologize. I'm just saying, I want you to remember what I'm saying.
We appreciate that. We do.
Guys, this episode's sponsor is none other than the 7-Figure Medicare Agent Summit, the premier Medicare event / conference that you can go to in 2025. At the summit, guys, we don't believe in nonstop pitches, right? You're not paying to get in the room so you can be sold to get into a different room, right? It's never ending getting in different rooms and eventually you're going to get some value. No, you get the value right then and there. Things that are shared at the summit are oftentimes behind $10,000 to $15,000 paywalls, but you get it for a very low price of typically $500, discounted till the end of the month at $300 a ticket. The summit is an amazing event in terms of content, speakers, value, and of course, networking and fun. We always have so much fun. So make sure to get your tickets to the 7-Figure Medicare Agent Summit before the end of January to get your massive discount and get a $300 ticket while you can.
Guys, I'm dropping the link right now in the comment section to the 7-Figure Medicare Agent Summit website. So that way you can check it out. We've already announced some of the really big speakers that are going to be there. We still have some really exciting speakers we haven't announced yet. We have some great sponsors who've already chosen to sponsor this event that we haven't announced yet. So we're really, really, really excited about the event this year. So drop the link in the comments. Check it out.
Okay. Can you hear me? I lost you for a second.
Yeah, your audio was... Unplug your mic, sir, and plug it back in. Guys, Christian's technology is... I think it's a Utah internet problem, potentially. I don't think they get the same technology that we get. Christian, can you hear me?
Mic check. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Christian's back, you guys. We lost him for a second,
Okay.
but all right.
All right. We did it. We figured it out.
We did it.
All right, guys, let's shift gears into the topic at hand. And that is, if you are a new agent, where should you start when it comes to product line? I think I want to start off this topic by addressing that comment that we said we'd circle back with.
Yes.
I am a big believer that
do you want me to reread it really fast?
Yes, please.
Let me reread it, because this is a really great question, and this is super important because tons of new agents coming into the space all the time. Someone yesterday, we were on a private call, Christian and I, with somebody, and they were talking about how we specifically interact with more new agents than potentially anybody, just based on our footprint, our audience. So this is really important to us. We want to help you guys, especially the new agents out. We want you to be successful. So here's the question, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Christian. For a newer agent, which line of business is easier to close? Which fits right into the title. Should an agent start with Medicare, ACA, or life? Christian, what's easiest? Easiest? I want to be easy.
So I want to start off by saying there's going to be people out there, and there was the comment mentioned, it's very confusing trying to learn them all. You should start off with one. There will be people that watch this stream and say, well, I'll just get contracted for them all. No, don't do that, please. Pick one, learn it really well, and then add another one to it. That is, to me, the most surefire way to make sure that you don't overwhelm yourself and cause your own downfall by trying to do too much. So I want to start there. Now, I'm biased, y'all. I'm so biased. I mean, I'm a Medicare guy. I would always encourage people to start with Medicare.
Medicare Supplement, Medicare Advantage, or both?
Both.
Okay.
Because I look at it like, I think learning Medicare and ACA at the same time is going to be too much for most people at the beginning. I think learning Medicare and final expense at the same time, too much for most people. But learning Medicare and going broad with Medicare and everything that entails Medicare, right? Advantage, PDP, MedSup, I think is a good way to go. Because you're basically starting off as a Medicare specialist, and you're going to be so much more savvy than everyone that's trying to do everything. I couldn't tell you how many times in the field I would go up against an agent where they were a financial planner, excuse me, or they were a PNC guy, and whatever the case might be. For some reason or another, they're doing Medicare as like their secondary thing, and I don't ever recall losing a deal when I ran into an agent like that. I would always just crush them because I knew so much more than they did, and the client could tell. It was, basically like, it was basically like a baseball player, Aaron Judge, playing basketball with LeBron. He's a great athlete. He's a big guy, but he's a baseball player, right? He's not a basketball player. So I think I'm biased. I would start with Medicare. The reason I say that is because I think Medicare is starting off building a very strong foundation. I think you have the highest retention rates in Medicare. I think Medicare has the most loyal clientele, right? Opposed to ACA and that kind of thing. I think that Medicare of the three is probably the hardest to learn. So you're getting the hardest one out of the way first.
See, that's where I think we have different opinions.
Okay, let's talk about this. That's
where I don't agree with you. Brindle Nation, stand up. Tell him he's wrong. Stand up to him. It's way harder to learn. It's way harder to learn. As a final expense agent who, years of selling life insurance, then came into the Medicare side of the business, still wouldn't say I'm the most proficient Medicare agent in the world. I know a lot. The complexity of the Medicare space, I don't even know how to compare it to something as simple as final expense is so simple. I feel like it takes 30 seconds to explain to a new agent, and that agent can go start selling it tomorrow. It's like, hey, Mrs. Jones, do you have anything if you die tomorrow that would cover your funeral costs? Oh, you don't? Okay. Well, do you want to pay $50 a month for a $10,000 plan that your family would be able to get tax-free and then pay for your funeral or potentially other final expense needs? And then it's like, I just have 7 to 10 health questions. And then if you go through those, you'll qualify for, a level benefit day one coverage. It's just so easy. There's no doctors. There's no networks. There's the change year over year on a final expense plans is minimal, right? I mean, that's one of the craziest parts with the Medicare industry when you compare it to the life insurance industry. Life insurance has been, right. Well, AEP is part of it, but also just the up and down of, benefits changing with plans and rules and regulations changing. It is a lot it's not even, I wouldn't even say it's a one-time learning comparison. The ongoing learning is also a significant difference. You learn life insurance 1 month, you're pretty much set forever, right?
It's true.
Final expense. It's so easy. Final expense is easy. And there's probably some people who are going to hear this and be like, well, Glenn, I'm selling indexed universal life and I'm overfunding the policy and I'm actually providing a retirement solution for people under the age of 50. And this is super complex and I'm a genius. And okay, listen, that's great. It's fantastic. That has its place too.
Exceptions, not the rule.
Right.
So, okay.
I would say in this, let's take this conversation. If you're focusing on the senior market specifically, let's just to simplify this.
Sure. I mean, here would be my rebuttal to that. Your Honor,
it's like
there's malarkey going on in the court.
Mute his mic, please. Cut his mic. 2 minutes. Christian, 2 minutes. Rebuttal. Respond.
60 seconds for Trump. 5 minutes for the. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. Canceled. So here's my rebuttal. I think everything you said is true, and I wouldn't argue with any of that.
End stream right there. What I said is true.
Clip that.
And what I said is true. He won't argue with any of it. We're done. Thank you.
No. Okay. Except for 2 things. One, final expense might be easier to learn, but it is harder to sell once you learn it.
True. That's
true.
I've
always looked at it like final expense is easier to learn, harder to sell. Medicare is harder to learn, easier to sell once you've learned it.
Yes.
You don't. I mean, think about how many Medicare agents won't even entertain the idea that they are salespeople because it doesn't feel like sales to them, right? Like it's. I mean,
it's probably 40% of you, if not more, based on polling we've done in the group before. I'd say close to half of you would be like, I don't do sales. I'm a Medicare plan advisor or something.
And
like that.
I think to sell final expense in a real way, you have to be a really buttoned up salesperson.
Yes.
Would you agree with that? Right. I think that is becoming more and more rare to see in people these days. Sales is just not as much of an emphasis. I think you could be a mediocre salesperson and be a decent agent because you look at it like you're educational, right? You're like an elementary school teacher in your minds. even though you're not, but that's
Right.
how you view it, right? That's number one. Number two, final expense has, in my opinion, a little bit more risk from the standpoint of you're going to get a lot more chargebacks.
For
And
sure.
that can just cripple a new agent, right? You get chargebacks all around. It's going to happen. But I mean, what do you think the industry averages of final expense chargebacks versus Medicare? I would think Medicare usually on average is probably 85 to 90% persistency on Medicare products. What do you think it would be for final expense?
The numbers I was going to say before you said your numbers, I was going to say probably, I would imagine 10% is the minimum expectation for an average Medicare agent, right? So for every 10 Medicare policies they write, one of them's probably going to fall off or get canceled or replaced, whatever, right? That's like face to face. If you're telesales, maybe it's a little higher. In general, telesales is going to have more chargebacks, more cancellations, most likely, than face to face. Although I will say, I've talked to some people selling over the phone. They have really buttoned up systems in place to combat this. And some agency owners that I really trust and believe have given me numbers that are really, really high for telesales. So not that it's impossible to have these types of numbers with telesales. I just think with face-to-face, you're more likely to close the policy, more likely to retain the policy. So for the sake of this argument, face-to-face sales, I'm going to guess it's probably around 1 out of 10 for a Medicare agent, maybe 15%, like you said. So 10 to 15%. For final expense, it's probably 1 out of 4. It's probably about 25%, 20 to 25%. So many variables to those numbers.
Of course.
But regardless, you're talking about 2 to 3 times more policies most likely falling off from these seniors. Now, here's the other, just like you said, final expense is harder to sell, easier to learn. Final expense has more chargebacks, more cancellations, but your first year commissions typically higher, right?
True. Yeah. That's a great point. I think it's interesting, right? Like, I do feel like the argument for final expenses, there's a lot of people that I know that are in the Medicare space that do well, that started in final expense and then migrated over to Medicare. And I don't think there's a lot of people that have done the opposite that I can think of. Can you? Someone that started with Medicare and then migrated over to final expense. You don't usually see that as much.
It's kind of the exception versus the rule. Over the past decade of being in this space, in the senior industry, I have watched the average final expense agent or agency go from final expense to med sup to Medicare Advantage. Yes. There's been this like migration. And I would say it's like a 90% migration. It feels like it's been very interesting to witness. There might be an example here or there I could pull out where someone was like, I'm done with Medicare, I'm selling final expense. But that's definitely the exception compared to the majority.
Yeah. So that would probably be the argument for final expense is like, it's where a lot of people cut their teeth. It's where they get their start almost. And then they move over to Medicare later. My thought process is I just feel like Medicare is more, again, I'm biased, people. Take it with a grain of salt, right? I'm the Medicare guy, I'm the Medicare guy. But I feel I've always looked at it as the most sustainable of the 3 products you can sell, right? You build a book of business. I think it has the most value. It has the most persistency. It's the best asset that you can build. And that's my argument for that. I love how ACA just has been totally like pushed to the side. It's not even being considered.
The redheaded stepchild of these 3.
Let's entertain.
I did see there was a comment. There was a comment about ACA earlier in the group on the stream, and it was, I want to read it here. I don't want to. ACA is easier than Medicare for most new agents. Right. So I thought that was interesting. What do you think about that?
So I have so much to say about that, but
shout out to Steve, by the way. Thank you, Steve, for the comment.
Here's the thing. I know there's several people that do take that approach, right? Like our friend of the show, friend of the Facebook group, Joanna takes that approach with new agents. Last time we talked about this with her, last time I talked to her about it.
Yeah.
I think she recommends a lot to new agents
Yeah,
Start with
she said
ACA,
that
get
on
some.
yeah, she said that on our stream the other day.
Yeah.
You're right.
So
She did.
I think the argument against that. So I think in general, ACA policies are easier from the standpoint there's less compliance, even though there's been more compliance added. There's still going to be a little bit less compliance than Medicare. Probably a bigger pool of people that you can write. There's more people under 65 than over. And there's probably less agents. There's less competition. The reason why I typically don't want my agents to start with it is because I feel like it is so volatile, right? I feel like it is so volatile from the standpoint of I think we're going to see more changes in the ACA market over the next 5 years than the Medicare market by far.
Probably.
I think you're going to see.
Why is that? Why don't you explain that to I understand why you're saying that, but for those who might be like, why is ACA more volatile than Medicare? How would you explain that? With hundreds of insurance agents and agency owners at the event, this could not be a better opportunity to spotlight your business. If you're looking for a sponsorship opportunity and where to spend your sponsorship dollars this year, the Seven Figure Medicare Agent Summit is the spot to do it. You can have your own booth. You can network with agents. This is the 4th annual summit, so there's going to be a lot of agents there and a lot of agents who are looking for help from vendors for leads, educational vendors. You could have a software tool. There's so many great vendors that we've had in the past, and we're looking at a lot of great opportunities for businesses to sponsor at the Seven Figure Medicare Agent Summit. So if you are looking for a sponsorship opportunity, make sure to check out sevenfiguresmedicareagentsummit.com.
Get your tickets today while they're still available and reach out about sponsorship opportunities. We'd love to have you involved with the Seven Figure Medicare Agent Summit in 2025. Now back to the show. I think there's a couple contributing factors. I think the first one is you are dealing with a clientele that is younger. So you're dealing with younger people. And what are younger people compared to older people in a vacuum, right? Of course, not everyone, exceptions, not the rule. But in a vacuum, younger people are less reliable. Their lives go through dramatic changes more often, right? They'll move, they'll get a job.
I'm personally offended by everything you're saying as a young person, as a young person that I classify myself as.
Yeah.
They're harder to get a hold of though, for sure, right? That's another piece.
They're harder to get a hold of. I think there's just more likely scenarios that will pop up of changes in their life that you have no control over that will cause them to leave you as an agent. Whereas Medicare beneficiaries, it's not as common to see them uproot their lives and go through major changes that affect you being their agent, right? So I think I like the demographic of clientele much more than I do ACA. And I will say, the second thing I'll say is, whereas most ACA apps are going to be easier, when you do run into one that's tricky, or when you run into one that's like a shit show for whatever reason, it's a freaking nightmare to get it fixed. Yeah. In my opinion, not most policies, but I think the harder cases are harder than the hard Medicare cases, in my opinion. I might just be saying that because I'm a Medicare guy, and then I think the third thing is, there's no upfront commissions. It's all paid as earned. And when you're starting off, that upfront commission is very helpful for paying your bills.
Yeah.
Those would be my three.
The scary part with ACA, and Christian and I have talked about ACA a lot behind the scenes. The part that scared me with ACA is the level of abuse it's seen over the past few years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To me, that's a big red flag. When you're seeing a policy line like ACA, right? This under 65 health market where it's being abused. The no-call leads was a big one, right? Where essentially policies were being written without an agent even talking to that individual. All sorts of crazy stuff.
One of our agents posted something, I think, in a group, and maybe shared it with us personally as well last year, that they had a deal. They were working on a client that they were writing, and when they pulled up their history in Health Sherpa of their
Oh
applications,
yeah, I
there
remember
was
this.
there was like 60.
Yeah,
So this
that
person had
was
been flipped
nuts. Yeah, I remember this.
60
Yeah,
times.
yeah, yeah. You want to talk about chargeback risk? I mean, holy, that's crazy,
And the
crazy, crazy.
compliance they've added, I believe, is cumbersome. Like
Yeah,
from the standpoint of, you have a situation where someone already has an agent, you're trying to move them. If that's a Medicare person, you just put in a new app. Boom, you're the agent,
right,
right? New plan. But with ACA, you have to do this insane 3-way call to the marketplace, or you have them fill out the
right,
form, right? To where they have to fill out
right.
a lot of portions of the application. They're probably going to do it wrong, right? It's just harder to become AOR for people that have already had agents. Like, I don't like any of that. And I feel like a new agent will run into more these situations where they're just like, fuck this. You know what I mean? I'm gonna go back to my job, Like,
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah. So that's my take. I see the argument for the ACA stuff, but at the same time, I just feel like there's so many things working against it to be like, that's where I want to start building my house.
Right,
That's where I want to start building the foundation of my home,
right.
on, I don't know. I feel like it's a weaker foundation than Medicare is. And I just don't want
There's
that.
there's a congruency of Medicare and ACA working together that I really like. Um, for some of you out there who have bigger ACA books, when you have folks aging out, right? I mean, we were talking about turning 65 leads and in the turning 65 market. We've talked a lot here in the group. Those are really valuable Medicare clients. So there is something about the synergy between the two, where if you have someone who's getting out of the work market, they're going to be retiring, they are getting on a Medicare plan, being able to facilitate that transfer internally, I think is awesome. To take all of those agents off their ACA plans and put them on
Yes.
Medicare plans, that's awesome when that happens. I've seen it firsthand. I know a lot of clients that I've worked with over the years who do that really successfully. But again, that's having both of them, which we don't recommend, to start having both. So
It's
um,
it's definitely better to start with one thing, I think.
right,
I think the other thing too is like, someone's going to watch this and perceive that we're saying you shouldn't do ACA. Long term, there is zero reason not to do ACA as a Medicare agent. You should do both for sure. They go together like peanut butter and jelly, right? So you definitely should do both. So I guess the question becomes, I think both of us are probably in line. We'd probably recommend either starting with Medicare or final expense, one of the two.
yeah.
What is the downside of Medicare? Let's be objective about this, starting with Medicare. What's the downside of it? What would you tell someone?
So and ultimately, the variable here that chooses your path when you're starting as a new agent, there's some stuff personally that you have to figure out as far as what's the best path for you, because I don't necessarily say that there is one path for every person. So, one variable here is, what does your savings account look like as you're getting started, right? As a new agent.
That's a great variable, I'd
I'll
say.
tell you, I'll tell you again personally. Sorry, as a new agent, I did not have a lot of money saved up. I was like 22 when I first got my license. I didn't have money for leads. I didn't have money to wait and build up renewals, with Medicare policies. I really needed a higher first year commission in order to make enough money to really survive as a brand new agent. Hindsight being 2020, if I could go back to when I was 22 and first getting in the industry and getting licensed, I would have loved to have had a savings in place where I could have focused on Medicare and could have been like, hey, I might not make much money my first year, but all those renewals are going to build going into year two. That's a big one.
Ramen noodle diet the
That's
first
right, baby.
year to 2 years, probably for some even longer. Ramen noodle diet, sleeping on your relatives' couches is always a good idea if you're able to do so. No, I think about myself, right? Very similar. Like I was 21 when I started selling Medicare. And, I was living in an apartment with 3 roommates and I had no money and I had like a car that barely worked. I didn't have anything. Now,
Yeah.
people are like, oh, you worked with your dad. Your dad paid you. No, my dad didn't pay me shit. Like I got paid commission,
Right.
And I was given a cold call list that cost $100. Like that was
Right.
what I was given.
Right.
But I was given training and everything like that, not to downplay that. That was valuable. But like I had to keep working my job. I went to part-time hours at the time. I was making $9.50 an hour.
Woo! Don't spend that all at once.
Not all at once, not all in one place. And so I had to keep doing that. And my roommates bailed on me. Like they just, they were around my age, they're like, hey, we're shitty, 19 to 22-year-olds. Goodbye.
So you had to take on all the rent.
So here's what happened. I started dating my wife now.
You're like, Stormy, please move in. Please help cover my rent.
We started dating, and then 2 months into us dating, this happened. I did not ask her to move in, for the record. She was like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. I remember just feeling like this sense of like desperation.
What was the payment? Out of curiosity, what was the payment?
I think it was like $900 a month.
So you were paying $300, your roommates leave, now you have to pay $900. Was the lease in your name?
It was in all of our names, but they didn't care what happened to their credit and everything. And I was like, I care, know. So
brutal.
My wife, it was actually Stormy's idea to move in, and she worked overtime at her job to help me pay the bills.
Wow.
She was working at a call center. She was making like $15 an hour, something like that. And
destroyed you.
So she came in and saved
$9.50? Yeah, $15 an hour.
Yeah, she came in and saved me in terms of helping pay rent, getting bills paid, everything like that. And so it's tough, guys. If she hadn't have done that, we might not be on this podcast today.
Wow. Stormy Brindle, everybody. 7-figure Medicare agent's potential founding grace. This is amazing. What a story.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I had no idea about this. Your room. If you had told me, I forgot. Your roommate's leaving. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. It was wild. I was like, wait, I'm like, you can't do that. I'm like, you're on the lease. And they're like, we don't care. And I was like, you can do that? I'm like, what?
So how far into your Medicare career were you at this point? Like, how long had you been selling insurance?
I believe not long, maybe like
less than a year,
3 or 4 months.
Oh yeah, that's the death knell. That's what sinks a brand new agent. Yeah.
And so
core expenses going up.
And so I'm and the only reason I was able to make it work was 2. Number 1, I had a great supportive partner who believed in me and believed I was going to make it work. She says she did. I don't think she ever really thought we'd be where we are today. She's like,
I'm gonna have to pick up 2 jobs for this loser.
It worked out. It was a good investment.
Yeah,
it was a good investment for her. But so that's 1. 2, I was young and I didn't have, a ton of bills. I had the rent, groceries, like car insurance, stuff like that. But like I didn't have children. I didn't have a lot of financial responsibilities. So when I talk to some of you guys that are starting off and you're 40, 50, I think having a savings is imperative. I think it's absolutely imperative, because I talk to some of you guys that you're like, 45, 50, and you're starting, you have multiple children, a mortgage, a spouse. I'm like, man, I'm like, because it is the Medicare build is a slow build. it's a 3 to 5 year trajectory before you really start seeing real results. It builds every year, it gets a little better every year, but like it's not an overnight thing by any means.
No, and if you talk to almost any successful Medicare agency owner when they're in years 5, 6, 7, it can be tough because you look at them, you look at their lifestyle, you look at their income. It's easy to be like, wow, they got rich quick in Medicare, but it's really not at all like that. It is a slow grind. It is nose to the grindstone, head down for years. And eventually, yes, you can get there, but that's one policy at a time, or maybe you're building an agency and you're recruiting one agent at a time and helping them sell one policy at a time to get to the point that you have thousands of clients on the books. It's not easy. If it was easy, you'd see every Medicare agent hitting those types of milestones, but it's not. The average Medicare agent only sells 4 policies a year. We've talked about that stat many times. Round up to 5 if you want. Who cares? That is less than 1 a quarter, or averaging 1 policy every 3 months. It's not easy. It's not easy to get to several thousand clients.
It's not easy. I mean, I think, to me, the argument against starting with Medicare is what we just talked about, right? Like, it's a slow build. The compliance is tricky.
We didn't even talk about that. Yeah, that's a whole nother piece of it.
You're a new salesperson, right? You have scope of appointments, 48-hour scope of appointments. That's hard. Let's call it what it is. It's hard. Now, is it possible? Is it able to be worked around? Certainly it is. It's not a death blow, but for a lot of people that just get started, I can see it being rough. I had the 48-hour rule when I started,
right.
Call recordings rules, storing those call recordings. Like, there's a lot of complexity in terms of compliance about starting with Medicare. So I can see that being really, really tricky as well. And yeah, I mean, it's not perfect by any means. And it's got a tremendously high fail rate because of those reasons, I believe. It's confusing to learn. We talked about that at the beginning. It's, takes a long time to grow. I would say that's probably the same for ACA too, unless you're doing some no-call thing and you're getting like 5,000 enrollments in a year or something like that. We didn't really touch too much on the no-call stuff.
That's its own podcast. We need to do an episode. That'll be coming soon, you guys. We'll do a whole ACA no-call, all that nonsense. That'll be great.
I would love to. That's got to be like a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah, that's a Netflix documentary actually that we're gonna put together for you guys. That'll be wild.
A 3-part, hour and a half a piece segment. Docu-series.
Now, I do want to say too, it's not all rose-colored glasses on the live side. Just because I think it's easier to start selling final expense, the policies are simple to understand. It is more difficult to sell. Also, I believe, last time I looked at this, the average life insurance agent, I want to say, makes like $20,000 a year. So again, it's a very, $20,000 in commissions on the life side. That's probably like 30 policies a year, roughly. Obviously, again, tons of variables. What type of policies, what carriers, what are your contract levels? Tons of variables to what that actually looks like. But that's like 3 policies a month on the life side, less than 1 a week. It's hard to eat. It's hard to eat if you're only selling 2 or 3 life policies for, especially final expense, because a lot of times these are smaller life policies. At the time when I was like really at my best, I was selling an average of probably 5 policies a week. I was trying to do at least 1 per day. 20. If I could write 20 policies in a month, even if I'm, getting some cancellations, as long as I was maintaining 15 to 20 a month, I was doing well. I was really cruising. So, it's not all rose-colored glasses, no matter where you start. I think you're going to have some bumps and bruises. I think the important thing is understanding what your current situation is. Try to be self-aware. Try to understand, okay, this is going to take some time to build up. I don't have the savings to wait necessarily. Okay, maybe final expense would be an easier thing to get into. And then whatever lane you do pick, stay in it. Don't try to jump into another lane too soon. That is the recipe for failure. That is the recipe for disaster. If you're like, I'm going to start doing ACA, I'm going to start doing Medicare, I'm going to start doing final expense, I'm going to start doing all of it. I'm going to get my PNC license. I'm going to get licensed in 10 more states. I'm going to get 20 more carriers contracted. You can do it all. You just can't do it all at once.
Yeah. I have never seen an agent come in and start with us that I can remember, that I can think of, that either, and I've always been consistent about my recommendations on this. You know, everything we've talked about in the show, start with one thing, start with your home state, like keep it simple, right? Like get good at what you're starting off with first. And then add to it later. I've never seen an agent come in that I can remember that either failed out trying to do that and just go, you know, being like, oh, what fuck Christian, what does he know? You know what I mean? Or either one, they fail out, or two, they struggle.
Yeah.
They are humbled. They pivot,
Yeah.
take my advice, and then they'll tell me, be like, you were right. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course. You know, I've been doing this a long time and I've been where you are. I know what you need to do.
We have a question here in the comments. It'll be our last question before we wrap up with final thoughts from Robin. Who do you recommend to connect with to add final expense and ACA contracts onto an existing Medicare business?
There's this wonderful little group called Everything Senior Insurance, formerly known as Christian Brindle Insurance Services, that can accommodate both of those things without issue. I will comment under that comment and give you an email address, Robin, to reach out to. But yeah, I mean, we could certainly help with that. We provide contracting for both final expense and ACA.
For sure.
And we do all three internally. So yeah, I mean, we can definitely help you with that.
I'm going to share my final thoughts on today's episode, you guys, and then I will ask Christian for his final thoughts. Final thoughts on, should an agent start with Medicare, ACA, and if you don't know what ACA is, that's the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, the under 65 health market, or life insurance. This is a classic debate that is always ongoing, in my opinion. It's very similar to the telesales versus face-to-face conversation. While, you know, I think Christian and I both presented a lot of different reasons for why maybe one would be better for an agent to start with versus another. Ultimately, again, I really think you need to understand where you're at as an agent and make sure that what you want to accomplish, what your goals are, that the line of insurance you start with matches that. The more times you end up switching, if you start with life, or you start with Medicare, you start with ACA, or you start with something else, and then you're like, oh, actually, let me try this. Oh, actually, let me try this. I can tell you right now, every time you switch without being proficient in one, your chances of failure and failing out of the industry go way up. I've seen that over and over and over. When an agent starts jumping around, I need more carriers. Oh, these carriers are wrong. I want to try these carriers. I need to get my PNC license. If you really want to be successful, if you want longevity in this industry and you want to make money, pick your lane, stay in it, keep your head down, and grind for 1 to 2 years. And at that point, you know, I'd say 1 to 2 years later, at that point, maybe you start to really look around and say, okay, what's something I can potentially add? Maybe there's something else I need to do. Maybe I do need a few more states. Maybe I do need a few more carriers. Maybe I can start selling final expense. So that's my final thoughts on today's episode, you guys. Again, don't forget Freebie Friday. Comment below on any of the live streams happening this week. Automatically enters you in to our giveaway this coming Friday. Mr. Brindle, final thoughts on today's episode.
Yes. Love all of that. You guys, I'm biased. I'm a Medicare guy. So I'm going to pick Medicare. I'm going to pick Medicare. Okay. Like, because I started with Medicare and it worked out really great for me. in my career. And so I just can't say anything other than if I had to go back and change my direction or my trajectory, I wouldn't, because it worked out. Doesn't mean there's not arguments for your specific situation on starting with a different product. And, I think that you can make arguments for all three of these, that that's good to start with them. But, I think in terms of getting started, if you're watching this, if you are new, if you do end up listening to this, start in your home state. Don't make it overcomplicated for yourself. Don't try to do everything at once. There's an absolute trail of carcasses that you can follow of agents that thought they could do it all at the beginning, right? So don't throw your own carcass amongst those carcasses.
Very true.
Heed the warnings. Heed the warnings.
The British are coming.
Yeah.
The British are coming.
You ever see that Courage the Cowardly Dog segment, when we were kids? Return the slab or suffer the curse. Anyway, only millennials probably know what I'm talking about.
Hooray.
So
creepy stuff happens in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Thank you guys for watching all the way to the end. You guys are awesome. You're rock stars. You're superstars. You know this. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review on all podcasting platforms you're listening on that might allow you to do so. Apple Podcasts is a great example. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube. And if you're watching on the Facebook group, on the YouTube channel, comment #Team Replay if you watch the replay on this. And we'll see you guys tomorrow with special guest Dalton Miller. Woo! On tomorrow's podcast. Super excited about that, to chop it up with Dalton. We love Dalton and Retire Flow. So we'll see you guys then. Until then, here's to massive success for all of you. Thanks, everybody.